Welcome to Bias Breakdown. I'm your host, Kara Rucker. Kilmar Abrego Garcia. You've likely heard the story as it's been the lead in many broadcasts over the past week. But you probably haven't heard it told like this. We'll cover every angle, from his deportation from Maryland to an El Salvador prison and why that's being reported as wrongful. We'll talk about his alleged gang affiliation and the evidence being presented to support the claims, and where things stand in the legal battle that went to the Supreme Court and is likely to land back in the High Court. This is where you'll get the facts of the story. We have a lot to cover, so let's get straight to it. News outlets on the left are largely holding Abrego Garcia up as a symbol of what they call an inhumane failure of President Trump's mass deportations. And news outlets on the right deem him a dangerous individual who was rightfully deported by the administration. How the facts are being construed to construct a political narrative. That's the focus of today's Bias Breakdown.
Join Straight Arrow News. See the slant, avoid the bias. When others skew the facts, we give you the truth down the center. Welcome to Bias Breakdown.
You've been told two completely different things from networks on the left and right regarding Abrego Garcia's case from the get-go, beginning with how the media chose to identify and describe him. Left networks largely referring to him as the Maryland man, resident, or Maryland father who was wrongly deported.
The Maryland resident, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, being held in prison in El Salvador.
Exactly 1 month ago, the Trump administration abducted and imprisoned a Maryland man named Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
The Maryland man who was wrongfully deported to El Salvador.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland father who was mistakenly deported by the Trump administration.
Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland father who was sent to the prison by mistake.
Meanwhile, networks on the right referring to him as the alleged gang member and illegal alien deported back to his home country.
The Democratic Party rallying around an illegal alien who is an alleged gang member and accused domestic abuser.
Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen is defending his trip to El Salvador to meet with the suspected MS-13 gang member.
The supposed Maryland father, who was actually an MS-13 affiliated illegal alien from El Salvador.
They're literally traveling to El Salvador, fighting for a gang member, terrorist, wife beater, allegedly, and illegal immigrant, even if none of the other things are true. An illegal immigrant.
The same pattern was seen across print media as well. Other news outlets on the left, like Axios and NPR, calling Abrego Garcia a wrongly deported Maryland man, and other outlets on the right, like the Daily Wire and the New York Post, identifying him as an MS-13 suspect and gangbanger. The case has become a war of words between the two partisan sides of media. The White House got in on the descriptor words in the media, making this post on X showing red ink corrections to a New York Times headline reading "Senator meets with wrongly deported Maryland man in El Salvador," changing it to MS-13 illegal alien who's never coming back. Language aligned with that used in right-leaning media. The press secretary also sounded off last week.
Based on the sensationalism of many of the people in this room, you would think we deported a candidate for Father of the Year.
So let's talk about this for a second and break it down. It's common for news outlets to use descriptor words when circling back to a news story over and over again. But as you just saw, the framing of those few words can be chosen in a way to fit the rhetoric coming from one political side, which tilts the scale of balance in news reports. Here's the thing. All of these descriptors are technically accurate. He did reside in Maryland. He does have kids. He came into the U.S. illegally. He is an accused gang member, and his girlfriend did report him for domestic violence. Sometimes we use media watchdog group All Sides who police this sort of bias in news reports. Here's what they wrote. Outlets from the right have highlighted Abrego Garcia's unlawful U.S. entry and accusations of domestic abuse and gang affiliations. These sources often sensationalized headlines. Many media outlets on the left sought to portray him sympathetically as a Maryland man, or in some cases, a Maryland father. Let's move on and get to the facts about Abrego Garcia's immigration status and known history, including allegations of gang affiliation. This is a lengthy process involving lots of court documents. We'll try to lay this out in a way where it's easy to follow in chronological order. Abrego Garcia entered the country illegally in 2011, according to his own testimony in court documents that came later during immigration proceedings. In 2016, Abrego Garcia begins dating Vasquez Sura. In 2018, Edwin Ramos, the father of Sura's 2 children, according to court documents, files an emergency custody hearing claiming the children were in serious danger because Sura was dating a gang member. A judge dismissed the custody battle over a lack of jurisdiction. In March 2019, Abrego Garcia is arrested at a Home Depot with 3 others in Maryland. In the report, police indicate several of those individuals are known gang members. Police say of Abrego Garcia, he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and a hoodie with rolls of money covering the eyes, ears, and mouth of the presidents on these separate denominations. Officers know such clothing to be indicative of Hispanic gang culture. Wearing the Chicago Bulls hat represents that they are a member in good standing with the MS-13. Officers contacted a past proven and reliable source of information who advised Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia is an active member of MS-13. Abrego Garcia was validated as a member of the MS-13 gang. Abrego Garcia has gang affiliation, and subject states that he has no information about gangs or human drug smuggling. Abrego Garcia is claiming fear of returning to his home country of El Salvador. This prior arrest of Abrego Garcia, particularly evidence of a Bulls hat linking him to a gang, was largely dismissed by left-leaning outlets.
Falsely accused of being a gang member, based solely on an anonymous tip that he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat when arrested in 2019. Despite never being charged with the crime, he was deported last month.
For proof, they point to his Chicago Bulls hat, which they say is often worn by gang members. But considering the team's merchandise is a bestseller for the NBA, do the millions of Bulls fans who wear the hat have reason to worry?
But right-leaning media pointed to it as evidence.
He gets picked up in a gang sweep. It was a murder investigation. They bring him in. He had $1,000 cash. He had a Bulls hat with the logo of the Horns, MS-13. He had a sweatshirt on, hear no evil, see no evil, MS-13. They ask him about human trafficking. All of a sudden, he goes, I'm really afraid to go back to El Salvador. They might kill me.
Police didn't charge Abrego Garcia in the incident and instead handed him over to ICE custody. DHS sought his removal from the country, citing illegal entry and gang affiliation. Abrego Garcia filed an asylum claim. In April, immigration judge Elizabeth Kessler denied his bail while his asylum request played out, writing the determination that the respondent is a gang member appears to be trustworthy and is supported by other evidence in the record, namely information contained in the gang field interview sheet. Although the court is reluctant to give evidentiary weight to the respondent's clothing as an indication of gang affiliation, the fact that a past proven and reliable source of information verified the respondent's gang membership, rank, and gang name is sufficient to support that the respondent is a gang member, and the respondent has failed to present evidence to rebut that assertion. While still detained by ICE, Abrego Garcia marries Souza in June. A few months later, in October, immigration judge David Jones denies his asylum request, writing his application for asylum came 7 years after his entry into the U.S., well beyond the 1-year filing deadline. The application for asylum is time-barred and must be denied. The judge instead grants a withholding of removal for Abrego Garcia, writing he fears returning to his country because the Barrio 18 gang was targeting him and threatening him with death because of his family's pupusa business. But noting withholding of removal, in contrast to asylum, confers only the right not to be deported to a particular country rather than the right to remain in the U.S. Abrego Garcia was released from custody and granted a work permit. In December of that year, the Board of Immigration Appeals denied his attempt to appeal Kessler's earlier ruling that his MS-13 affiliation was likely. The appeals panel ruling, the immigration judge appropriately considered allegations of gang affiliation against the respondent in determining that he has not demonstrated that he is not a danger to property or persons. Fast forward 2 years later, Abrego Garcia's wife, Vasquez Sura, files a temporary protective order against him shared by DHS on X, writing Abrego Garcia hit her in the eye and hit her with a work boot in 2020. In 2021, she says he punched and scratched her eye, causing her to bleed, ripped her shorts and shirt off, and detained her against her will. In her words, as part of the protective order filing, she wrote, "At this point, I am afraid to be close to him. I have multiple photos, videos of how violent he can be and all the bruises he has left me." Sura was asked about the protective order in an ABC News interview, and this was her response.
You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
My husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and I'm not going to push on that.
Sura released a statement to media following the resurfaced protective order, saying, "After surviving domestic violence in a previous relationship, I acted out of caution after a disagreement with Kilmar by seeking a protective order in case things escalated. Kilmar has always been a loving partner and father, and I will continue to stand by him and demand justice for him." Another prior record of Abrego Garcia to mention, in 2022, Abrego Garcia is pulled over in Tennessee, suspected by troopers of partaking in labor human trafficking, with 8 individuals in the car with him. Tennessee Highway Patrol is told by the FBI to let them go, and Abrego Garcia is given a warning for an expired driver's license. In Maryland, state law allows licenses to be obtained by non-citizens. While Abrego Garcia's record has been a major part of the story, it's the legal battle that follows his detainment by ICE in March that set off a series of questions over his deportation, if his due process rights have been violated, and if he will return to the U.S. On March 12th, Abrego Garcia is detained by ICE during a traffic stop. 3 days later, he's deported to El Salvador as part of 3 planes sent to the country's high-security prison. An ICE official wrote in a filing, "Through administrative error, Abrego Garcia was removed from the United States to El Salvador. This was an oversight, and the removal was carried out in good faith based on the existence of a final order of removal and Abrego Garcia's purported membership in MS-13. Abrego Garcia sues Trump's DHS over his deportation, writing DHS deported him to El Salvador without any legal process whatsoever, and in violation of an immigration judge order and a federal statute prohibiting them from doing so. Judge Paula Zenas rules DHS is ordered to facilitate and effectuate the return of Abrego Garcia. After appeals of the ruling, the Supreme Court ruled the administration must facilitate his return, but says the lower court may have overstepped in its demand to effectuate his return. Writing, "The order properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador." The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. This ruling has been interpreted differently by the Trump administration and Abrego Garcia's legal team due to the terms facilitate and effectuate. Here's Attorney General Pam Bondi and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem interviewed by Fox News.
It was a win. What the court also said was that these district judges do not have the right to interfere with the executive branch's ability to conduct foreign affairs, meaning President Trump's ability to do business with foreign nations, and they can't do that. What they also said is just facilitate, meaning if he wanted a plane flight, we could give him a plane flight, but we cannot effectuate it, meaning making it happen, which is what the district court had originally ruled. It was a win.
I think that what the Supreme Court said here in this decision was a very clear message to other judges across this country, is that stop acting like you have the authority to dictate foreign policy and national security decisions that the president is making to protect its citizens.
And here's Abrego Garcia's team.
The Supreme Court didn't have any issue whatsoever. 9-0 unanimously agreed that the district judge's order that they facilitate his return was absolutely proper, is in effect today, right now. There was one verb that they weren't sure what it meant. They asked her to clarify it, and she did.
The battle is being fought in court. And in court, the courts have already spoken. The Supreme Court has said the government must take steps to facilitate Kilmar's return.
It's this legal back and forth over interpretations of the ruling that could land the case back to the Supreme Court. It's also the same rhetoric which has led to such a partisan divide over the issue. Democratic lawmakers are currently in El Salvador demanding his release, following a trip from Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen.
It's good to be home. Now we need to end the illegal abduction of Kilmar Abrego Garcia and bring him home too. If you deny the constitutional rights of one man, you threaten the constitutional rights and due process for everyone else in America.
Yes. That same sentiment has largely been shared on left-leaning networks.
I mean, this violates due 14th Amendment due process, the 8th Amendment, right to counsel. It will go on and on and on.
What's happening right now for people to understand is a constitutional crisis. You have the President of the United States who has defied a unanimous Supreme Court order.
Whereas right-leaning networks have largely shared the other position.
But there's no question that he had due process repeatedly. So one of the questions that's bigger, that's going to be decided partially here and partially in later court rulings is, how many retries, how many opportunities do people get?
He is in the country illegally. And if you have crossed the border illegally, you are deportable by definition. Lots of people are yelling online and on television that he hasn't received any due process. And that is a complete lie, because he did get the due process to which illegal aliens are entitled. That is, he had an immigration hearing before a judge. And at that hearing, the judge found that the evidence presented by DHS was credible, that he was a member of MS-13, which also made him deportable.
You hear the contrast in interpretations of the Supreme Court ruling over whether Trump is defying court orders or is within legal bounds of not returning Abrego Garcia. It's hard to sum up a story in 10 to 15 minutes that consumed the news cycle last week and into this week. It's been the lead story most days, with both political sides claiming the moral high ground. From the left, fighting for due process rights of an individual who was in fear of his life if returned to El Salvador, where he was sent. And from the right, deporting someone who defied laws, claiming the country is safer without him given his alleged gang ties. That sentiment of a fight over the high ground is captured in the White House's post here, sharing an image of Senator Van Hollen meeting with Abrego Garcia to check on his well-being after his deportation in error, and Trump meeting with the mother of Rachel Morin, who was murdered by a migrant who wasn't supposed to be in the country, with the caption, "We are not the same." In summary, the story isn't going anywhere as legal questions are still left to be answered. And while political leaders from the left and right, along with partisan media, have come to their conclusions in the case, definitive answers are yet to come and will likely require another response from the Supreme Court. News outlets have reported on Abrego Garcia under different lights, with media watchdog groups saying the word choice is intentional with the agenda of shaping public perception surrounding the Maryland man or alleged MS-13 gang member. This was a long episode because it's just a very convoluted case. From Abrego Garcia's past run-ins with the law to several steps in his immigration court proceedings, and then the legality over his deportation to El Salvador. We didn't even cover all of the details here, but we tried to show some of the more prevalent facts to one of the biggest stories of the news cycle and how they have been distorted by news outlets on the left and right. And that's your bias breakdown. Thanks for watching this week's episode to the end here. I know that was a lot of ground to cover, so I hope you were able to stick with us and easily follow along. If you like this way of storytelling, do me a favor and check out the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts as well. There you'll find more of our content. And if you wouldn't mind doing me a favor and rating the show on those platforms, I'd appreciate it because we're trying to grow our audience over there too. Just search Bias Breakdown and you should see us pop up. In this episode, you saw a lot of court documents, police reports, court opinions, and so forth. I'm going to link all of our original sources in our news article if you'd like to take a further look for yourself. You can find that at san.com or by downloading our mobile app. A big thanks to Ian Kennedy, our video editor, and Allie Caldwell on our graphics this week, and Alex Nolte for helping me dig and find some of these sound bites of left and right news coverage. Thank you for watching Bias Breakdown. If you've noticed, I'll pop into the comments after we publish to YouTube, so be sure to join in on the conversation with us. I'll see you next time.